Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone once again to Sufi Ibrahim's YouTube videos. Today we're going to talk about probably the best known of all the Sufis, at least for sure in the Western world, Jalal Rumi. When someone tells me asks me about Sufism, the first person I mention is Jalaluddin Rumi. Why? Because he's the best known, and he's a very popular poet. You know, I recently went onto Facebook and joined a group called Rumi Quotes, I think. 600,000 followers following this Facebook group about Rumi. So very, very popular. And he was a great Sufi also. I used to enjoy early on in my Muslim career, I went often to Turkey and I would almost inevitably go to his maqam, which was in Konya. Very special place. Used to be a mosque, but during the secularization in Turkey, they made it into a museum and a mausoleum, but it's his maqam. And you could feel the barakat. When I went there with Sheikh Nazim was having a long discussion with Jalaluddin Rumi. I can't do that, but Sheikh Nazim was talking with him, and I don't remember what they were talking about actually, but the presence is there. In fact, there's a secret here, which is that the soul of the person is connected. This is an important Sufi secret. I think the soul of a person is connected with the place he's buried in. He isn't there. There's a lot of confusion about this, about the punishment of the grave, etc., etc. The soul leaves the body, has to be. But it has a connection still with the place that the body is buried. That's why it's important to bury the bodies so the soul can maintain connection. All this incineration stuff is really, it's haram. What's the other word for incinerating the body?
I forgot.
In any case, everyone knows what we're talking about. The Westerners have taken on, I think the English started it when they saw it in India, and they said, wow, this is a great idea. We'll be able to save space. It's much more easy to deal with the ashes than it is with the whole body, and we can put it in a smaller space. So these Indians have a great idea, but they don't. It's important for the body to be buried. Now most of the Christians are being incinerated. Cremation, thank you. Okay. As we get older, it gets a little harder to find the right word. Cremation. Haram. Tell people not to do it. In fact, I knew people who were more into the occult who say the soul is connected with the body for several days afterwards. When my own mother, may her soul rest in peace, was buried in the Jewish tradition, before they couldn't bury her right away because there were holidays and who knows what, so they had someone praying over her body for 3 days, night and day, to protect her from evil forces before they buried her. So burying is from the fitra, and cremation is from the foolishness and evil of modernism. Okay. So here's Rumi, and he's there at his maqam talking with Sheikh Nazim, appearing to a number of people. Another person Rumi appeared to was the caretaker. The chief caretaker at Rumi's mausoleum was also, paradoxically, he was an alcoholic. And I met him a few times, and very strange kind of person, a mixed breed, if you want. He was an alcoholic, and yet he was a lover of Rumi. And so I asked him, what's going on? He said, yeah, I know this is very bad, my drinking. He said, every night Jalaluddin Rumi comes to me and scolds me about my drinking, but I haven't been able to stop. So these are some of the mysteries of the universe. So that's where Jalaluddin Rumi was buried, in Konya, but he's from a Balkh in Khorasan. Now we were discussing with Hadi yesterday, where is Khorasan? Khorasan is in northeastern Iran, Afghanistan, southern Caucasus, in that area. Now what are they famous for? If you say to anyone who's in the know, what is Khorasan famous for now?
I don't know.
ISIS in Khorasan is what Khorasan is most famous for. So from Sufism and some of the holiest, most mystical people that have existed on this planet, now we have some of the most evil ones. ISIS in Khorasan. Astaghfirullah. But that's where he came from. And a lot of the great Sufis came from there. They either came from the Far East, in that area, Afghanistan, Balkh, Samarkand, Tashkent. They came from there. Or they came from the Far West, from Morocco and Tangiers and Andalusia, the western part. I guess the middle part of the Arab world was more preoccupied by Islamic sciences and scholarship and those things, although there were some exceptional people from there also. Abu Hassan Ashadali. But actually Abu Hassan Ashadali is in Morocco, actually, Ashadali. But he ended up getting buried in Egypt. And Abdul Qadir Jilani, Jilan is also from Iran, buried in Baghdad. So there were so many great Sufis coming from that area. Now, what is Rumi best known for? If you ask a Western person, the ones in the know, they'll tell you about the whirling dervishes, the sama of the whirling dervishes. You know that when they do spin around, in both directions, and wearing these long, elegant gowns and this high hat. The whirling dervishes. But from what was initially a contemplative practice, forgot to set the timer again, from what was initially a sectarian, a spiritual practice, contemplative, a meditation and movement that Rumi developed, it's become an art form, dance and music. Now, I met a very interesting man who was so Jalaluddin Rumi started a tariqat, if you wish, and they called themselves Mevlevi, and there are people who are still around who call themselves Mevlevi, but I believe I met the last real Mevlevi, who was Suleiman Dede, on one of my trips to Konya, and he told me, it's finished. There's no one to succeed me. He said, my son, I have no students, my son is left for America and he's gone the wrong way, and our tariqat, the Mevlevis, are cut. And Sheikh Nazim agreed. Sheikh Nazim was Naqshbandi, and the Naqshbandis continue, for better or for worse, as those of you in the know may be aware of, but the Naqshbandis continue. The Mevlevis are cut, although there are people still claiming to be Mevlevi, but mostly it's a song and dance art troupe that travels around the world. Beautiful music, beautiful dance, but no longer the yoga of Islam, no longer a mystical way, more a way of art. Now, besides the whirling dervishes, the other thing that Jalaluddin Rumi is famous for is his iconic story of how he came to Sufism. So Rumi was a scholar. I believe he was a Hanafi scholar. But it's it. And he would travel around teaching fiqh with, as some of the scholars did, with horses or camels full of backpacks with books, with all his books in it. And he met this wandering dervish called Shams Tabriz. He also has a maqam in Konya, if you want to go, very interesting place also. And Shams Tabriz took one of his bags of books, or several, and threw them in a well. Okay, there are various versions of this story, but I'll tell you the one I heard. He threw them in the well, and Rumi was, wow, what's going on? This is terrible. What are you doing? And Shams Tabriz said, this is artificial knowledge. Sheikh Nazim used to call it canned knowledge, what's in books. If you want to get to the real knowledge, then follow me. If you just want your books back, I can bring them out of the well and dry them off. And another version here says he already started drying them off. He said, I can bring back all your books. You either follow the way of books, or you follow my way and go for the real knowledge, the marifat. Become an arif rather than an alim in Arabic. And obviously Rumi chose the latter, to become an arif, to become a real Sufi. Now there's a very, very deep, important, I was going to say even devastating to our way of being, message in that intellectual knowledge cannot get you there. All of the abstract theories, no matter how brilliant they are, whether it's the theory of evolution or the Marxist theory of class struggle, or the Freudian theory of psychoanalysis, or the physics theory of the Big Bang, all of the theory will never get you to the ultimate understanding. None. Intellectual knowledge always ends up failing you. And we can see it at play all around us. Our governments, our health institutions, consistently making wrong decisions because of their relying on experts who are experts in abstract thought. They never go for experts in reality because they wouldn't recognize one if it came to them. They would probably say he's crazy or something, or he's delusional, if they saw a real expert in reality. So they prefer experts in abstract theories and data analysis and all this stuff. And they keep making the wrong decision over and over again. Just today, the latest version of abstract theory, most up to date, most trendy in tendance, AI, NVIDIA, the leading company in AI, reached a market value of $1 trillion. $1 trillion of foolishness. We don't need to go from human intelligence, which is seriously lacking, to artificial intelligence. We need to go to divine intelligence. That'll get us somewhere. Artificial intelligence will just make things worse. Ever noticed when you have a problem with your bank or your government and you go to their website and you do all these automatic choices and you never get an answer? That's AI. We already have AI. This is just more sophisticated AI that they're bringing out. And you end up in a dead end all the time. God forbid it should take over. It'll just be a disaster. We need some human intelligence which is inspired by divine intelligence and submission to the divine. That'll get us some good answers. The rest of us is just going to lead us astray. So that's Rumi, one of the greats. And Rumi, my favorite book, actually Rumi is best known in terms of authorship. He's best known for a trilogy known as Mathnawi, which is kind of a long epic poem about many, many things. He talks about ecstasy and he uses the metaphor of wine, but it's actually spiritual ecstasy and love and gardens and prophethood, all kinds of stuff in that poetry. Personally, I'm more of a prose person. Although I appreciate poetry sometimes, I'll be honest, I'm not a great lover of poetry because often it doesn't register until a lot longer. Yes, I can quote Shakespeare from time to time and see that it's brilliance, and I'm sure there's a lot of other poetry that can takes a long time. I prefer just give it to me like it is. I don't like all this sugarcoating. Sorry, that's my personality. So this is actually my favorite book on Rumi, Discourses of Rumi. And before we go further, I want to thank my assistant, Hadi, who did some research, allowing me to give this talk, that I'm using some of his research, some of my own, to put together and try to give people a feeling for who is this Rumi. But Rumi had some amazing insights. One of the insights that I really liked from Rumi was about contradictions and paradoxes. So he made the statement, I'm not sure where, but he said, anyone who doesn't realize that reality is replete, not just occasional, replete with contradictions and paradoxes, is not truly enlightened. So all these people that you see in the courts, in the government, in the sciences, in the universities, in the health institutions, trying to make everything coherent, they're excluding large swaths of reality that are not coherent, that are contradictory, and it's fine for them to be such. Reality is not logical and rational. I had thought that Freud had proved that point, but it doesn't seem like that. People are not acting from rationality most of the time. They're acting from unconscious motives, and that's part of, and there are contradictions between the conscious and the unconscious. In fact, Freud said that the unconscious wish is often, or always, the opposite of the conscious wish. People get fooled all the time. I noticed that when I was in practice. For example, a person who would come to me and say, what I want most in life is to have peace. And I knew right away when someone said that they were troublemakers. I knew that they were doing everything to generate conflict and friction, fitna we call it in Islam. And they said, but what I really want is peace. So the unconscious desire is war, conflict, disputes, and the conscious desire is peace. They're at odds with each other. That's the nature of reality. It's replete with those kind of contradictions. The women who go around saying, oh, what I really want is a man who's going to treat me nicely and who's going to be gentle. And then you see him going out with these, I don't like using swear words, but these bad boys, the worst of men. Oh, but what I really want is a guy, can't you see that there's no way this guy's going to treat you nicely? He doesn't have it in him. Attracted like a magnet.
I heard a story.
Hadi heard a story. Is it going to be relevant here?
To what you just said.
Okay, Hadi's going to...
So there's, it's a lawyer woman, I believe, and she would talk to these ladies who would get beat up or divorced. And one of the first question would ask is, well, the lady getting divorced or dumped, whatever, says, he changed, or he wasn't like this before with me. The lawyer lady would say, well, was he like that with other people? And then the first one would say yes, and the lawyer would respond, well, now you're just like the other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So the lawyer was using her logic. I have a similar story. I hope you could hear that. I think the microphone would probably pick it up, but I was once in contact with a psychologist. We'll see the contradictions again. And she was working for a women's shelter with abused women. She was very dedicated, a very competent psychologist. But she had one she was really worried about. I was a psychiatrist, so she wanted to refer her to me. So I was kind of reluctant because I know these people, they can be difficult. You know, a lot of people who claim to be victims are, you know, we're not supposed to blame the victim, but if you watch a victim operate, you'll see how they often set it up. So I was a little bit resistant, but I said, okay, I'll do you favors, an old friend of mine. So I scheduled the lady for an evaluation, and she doesn't show up. This is almost always a bad sign when someone doesn't show up for an initial evaluation. So I call up the psychologist and I say, you know, your client, she didn't show up. She said, oh, please, Dr. Krebs, please see her. Maybe something went wrong. Please give her another appointment. So I relented. I can see these things coming. I relented. Second appointment. She missed the second appointment. Okay? This is a lady claiming to be the victim. So I call up the psychologist. I say, you know, that's it. I can't afford to lose so many hours of my work. It's just frustrating. And she says to me in French, Quoi? You know, what's going on? Je peux la battre. She said, I could beat her up. She was so frustrated. Now this is a feminist woman at a refuge getting completely frustrated with this lady who was a victim. So this lady who says she wants to get out of being victimized is generating victimization. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about that. But beware, I've seen this often, beware of victims because they will end up making you into the bully, whether you like it or not. And I've seen that over and over again. Okay. This is not from Rumi, this is from Dr. Krebs. So let's get back to Rumi. But he'll say things that will be compatible with what I just mentioned. Everyone who sets out on a journey has a particular idea in mind. This is from Rumi. Once I arrive, I will be able to gain advantage and improve my affairs. My business will be set in order. My friends will be delighted. I shall defeat my enemies. Such are the ideas we have in mind. So these are the plans of man. Okay? And the Quran tells us man has his plans. But God's objective is, but God has his plans. And God is the best of planners. We make so many plans and think through so many ideas, and not one turns out according to our desire. Yet even after all of that, we continue to rely upon our own plans and choices. I'm going to repeat that because I see this over and over and over and over again. Even in people who say they're pious Muslims, or even in people who say they're Sufis or yogis or Buddhists. We continue to rely upon our own plans and choices. I go to a market in St. Anne's, not far from where I live. And there's a old friend of mine who's a Buddhist, who goes there, and he's really jumped on the climate change bandwagon, anthropogenic climate change. So one day I come up there and I say, what's going on? I won't name. And he said, I've joined a new movement. He's a Buddhist now, remember. They're also supposed to be submitted to reality. He said, I joined a new movement. I said, what's the movement? He said, Extinction Revolution. Probably some of you have heard it. That man is going extinct by this climate change and we have to do something. So I say to him, I'll make up a name here, John, you know there are other theories about this. He looks at me fiercely. He's really aggravated that I'm saying. I didn't dispute what he's saying. I just said, you know, there are other people who have different theories about this climate change. And he looks at me with this evil eye and then goes far away to another place. He's avoiding me. But foolishly, I can be foolish, I chase after him to tell him, no, these aren't quirky people. These aren't right-wing fanatics from the southern part of the United States. These are scientists. Then the look is even more intense, and I get a proper inspiration. Ibrahim, you better shut up or you're going to get punched in the face. Okay. These are people who are supposed to be surrendered. His own teacher is named Thich Nhat Hanh, and in his basic principles of Buddhism, it says directly, don't hold on to your ideas tightly. Don't hold on to your beliefs tightly. That's in his 10 Commandments of Buddhism. And here's one of his students who's ready to punch me in the face because I'm questioning climate change. Okay. So we have our own plans, and we have our own ideas, and we're very reluctant to let go of any of it. I have a couple of quotes as well. We could talk endlessly about Rumi, and I suggest anyone, if you can get this book, it's well worth reading. It's a basic book of spirituality. So the master said, well, the master would be Rumi, he does not see the master, he's talking about a student, at this moment in truth, because the desire which filled him, namely that he might see the master, was a veil over the master. Okay. So now we're getting into subtle metaphysics. Even desiring too much to find the right teacher or the right guru or the truth can get in the way of the truth. There's a book called Zen and the Art of Archery. There's also the art of motorcycle maintenance. But Zen and the Art of Archery. And it goes through the 7 principles of Zen that you need to become a skilled archer. And the last of all the principles is the desire to be a skilled archer. You have to let go of the desire to be a skilled archer in order to be a skilled archer, competent archer. It's subtle, these things. And this is very true in spirituality. At some point you have to let go of your mystical goal because your desire to arrive at it is an impediment, as is your desire to find a master. So he does not see the master at this moment without a veil. He can't see where the master is. So it is with all desires and affections, all loves and fondness which people have for every variety of thing, father, mother, heaven, earth, gardens, palaces, branches of knowledge, acts, things to eat and drink. The man of God realizes that all these desires are the desire for God. But you have to realize it. The desire for a partner, the desire for food, the desire for a job, the desire for money, the desire for this, that, and everything else. Desire for God. All of these, ultimately, the desire behind the desire is the desire for God. When men pass out of this world and behold the king without these veils, okay, so that's the Akhirah, then they will realize that all those were veils and coverings. All the other desires, like those Pakistani mothers who want their kids absolutely to be doctors, but they're totally unsuited for that job. All of those desires, and they don't hate when I say it, all of those desires are veils. You have to surrender to the divine will, not to your own will. So on the other side, the veils will be lifted, and their quest in reality will be that one thing, wujuhu, the face of Allah. That's all. Wayabka wujuhu rabbika. All that will be left is the face of your Lord. That's the real desire. All difficulties are then resolved, and they will hear in their hearts the answer to all questions. How do you have that experience? All questions answered, and all problems and everything will be seen face to face. It is not God's way to answer every difficulty singly. A lot of difficulties, you make prayers and nothing changes right away. But by one answer, all questions will be made known. The one answer is the presence of Allah and His will, all at once, and the total difficulty will be resolved. On the other hand, also from the same book, Reason is that thing which perpetually, night and day, is restless. Okay? This is, go to my blog, the process of deprogramming from the cult of the intellect. This is the cult of the intellect. It's all around us, everywhere. I see it every day. I see it on the TV. I see it in my friends who think they're good Muslims, stuck in the cult of rationality and the cult of the intellect. And Rumi is one of those rare people who saw through it. Reason is that thing which perpetually, night and day, is restless and in commotion. So the reason, the thing that you think is the solution, being reasonable, coherent, systematic, logical, objective, data-based, all these wonderful modern proverbs that are ultimately ignorance, thinking and struggling and striving to comprehend, even though he, okay, so this is the person, striving to comprehend, struggling, trying to make rational models, even though he, capital H, God, is uncomprehended and incomprehensible. You can't get there by reason. So give yourself a break. Do what Fritz Perls told us in Gestalt therapy. Said, lose your mind and come to your senses. A lot of people could benefit from that, especially in universities, government institutions, large corporate. Lose your mind and come to your senses, and then you'll see. You know, just an example. When the COVID pandemic started, yes, there was a COVID pandemic. For those are the paranoid conspiracy theories. It wasn't there, or it was all planned in advance. When the COVID pandemic came out, and they were saying, well, we think it's from the market in Wuhan, there was a Nobel laureate in virology. This is January 2020. It's just starting. The Chinese had released the genetic code of the virus. Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize-winning virologist who discovered HIV, looked at the code and said, there's no doubt that this is man-made. It has man's imprint right across the board. Bang! Bing! Finished! No need for complications. When I heard that, I said, that's the huck, that's the reality. 4 years later, they're still debating this. This is what happens from the cult of the intellect. You can't figure it out. You have to be able to see it. This is my epistemology. You have to be able to see it with the inner eye, hear it, or feel it. You can't figure it out. Or as the AA people say, let go and let God. That's the wisdom. There's so much stuff here. We'll try just a little bit. Here's another one. Though God Most High, yeah, this is another important one. We'll probably have to soon finish up here. God Most High has promised, from Rumi, that good and evil shall be rewarded at the resurrection. Yeah, this is really good. Yet an example of that comes to pass every moment and at every instant. Okay, so the Christians have a saying which is very valid. All the road to heaven is heaven already. Very important. So you can actually tell the end result by what's going on right now and at the beginning, in the here and now. Okay. So the end result you can actually feel comes to pass every moment and at every instant. If happiness enters into a man's heart, that is reward for making another happy. Okay. So you can feel when you're doing something wrong, you'll feel the angst that goes with it. When you're doing something right, you'll feel the happiness, and that happiness will only increase in time. If he becomes sorrowful, the person, it is because he has brought sorrow upon a fellow man. Okay, this one, there's some caveats about it. There's a number of reasons. Hamza Yusuf has some good talks about this issue. There's a number of reasons why we can be suffering. Some of it is from our previous actions that have brought on consequences. That's called karma. And some of us is the divine testing us. Some of the suffering is to elevate us. So we can't assume immediately because we're feeling sorrow or angst that we did something wrong. It could be, but it could also be a test that's going to end up uplifting us. Let's see if we can go into one more. This is again another criticism of empiricism. Most people, I know I say it, I've said it hundreds of times, but most people still believe in empiricism. They believe they can figure out what's going on by the outward, by the data, by the objective measurements, all of this kind of propaganda. And it just ain't so. Rumi says, every science learned in this world through study and experiment is the science of bodies. In other words, all of our science is empirical. The science acquired by crossing the portal of death, or dissociating from the body if you want, is the science of soul. Knowing about the science of I am God is the science of body. Well, this is complicated, actually. You need someone to help you. But what I understand him saying is that there are, for example, in Sufism, there are a lot of the ulama, the scholars, who have many are against it now for various reasons, but there are a lot of scholars that defend Sufism. That's not the same as being a Sufi. Having a positive idea of Sufism or being able to describe it and approve of it and tell about its history, that's not a Sufi. A Sufi is an experiential reality, or the search for an experiential reality. We want to know God as an experience, not as a concept. You know, Muslim scholars go on and on about Tawheed and ideas about God, but the reality of God is something else. And that's what we're working at. And that's what Jalal Rumi discovered with Shams Tabriz and tried to transmit in whatever way he tried to transmit. Through poetry, through discourses, through practices, through movement, meditation, he tried to transmit the experiential knowledge of God, and hopefully we can learn some of his knowledge, some of his methodology, some of his way of thinking to help us on that way. Because I don't know about the people listening, but for me that's the only thing that really counts. Besides having good behavior, following Sharia, etc. But the haq, having the experience of the ultimate reality, is what Sufism is all about, and it's what I'm trying to explain on these videos. May Allah grant us these openings. We begin our dhikr now always with Fatiha to open, because we need openings, and they can happen at any time. We're asking Allah for openings into this real knowledge, not this secondary, quote-unquote, scientific knowledge. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala mursalin wa alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha. Hopefully next week we'll talk more next week or the week after about Ibn al-Arabi, another famous one, but more in the direction of philosophy than poetry, but also a great mystic. Have a great week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.